In this tutorial we will have a look how enemy can attack us. Okay, so as you can see, you cannot able to see, but our player game object, it's basically taking damage. Okay, and if you haven't watched the first video of how you can transition between this attack animation clip and running, okay, chasing us, I have a link in the description, so you can go and check that out. Okay, so without further delay, let's dive into this topic. Okay, so what we gonna do, if we select this enemy and F2 focus on it and go to animation tab and click on this attack animation clip, we want this basically we want to create a invisible sphere, something right over here, and if that sphere collide with our player game object, okay, player game object, so in that situation player should take damage. Okay, so basically we want to create a attack point, something right over here, and we will create a invisible sphere, and if that sphere collide with our player game object, then player should take damage. Okay, so let's do that. So just right click on enemy, okay, then create an empty child game object. I already have created right over here, and I just call it attack point, so call it attack point. So from this point we want to create a invisible sphere, and if that sphere collide with player, then player should take damage. Okay, so let's open up our script to create that. So double click that to open up in Visual Studio. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna use a function. Okay, so let's go to bottom and let's create a public, okay, public void, and let's call the function something like attack. Okay, attack, and make some first bracket and some curly brackets. Okay, so what we want to do inside this function, and why we made it public, because we want to call this function right over here. Okay, right over here. So this is will be the perfect time to call the function right over here. Okay, so let's go to script now one more time. Okay, one more time. So to create a sphere from this attack point, what we need from this attack point, we have to use this physics 2d, sorry, not physics 2d, it's called physics dot check sphere. Okay, check sphere, and this function right over here, as the first argument, it will take the position from where you want to create this sphere, and the second position, it will take the radius of that sphere, we can call something like attack radius, and the third argument, it will take the layer mask, or you can say which game object you want to target. So we want to target our player game object. Okay, so player should take damage, so we need to get those things first. Okay, we need to assign those things. So let's make a comment by double slash for now, and let's go to top of our class. Okay, so first thing, we need a position, basically that attack point. So let's create a public, okay, public transform, let's call this one attack point. Okay, so and second thing, we need the radius of that sphere, or attack radius you can call. So also let's make a public float, let's call this one attack radius. Okay, and by default I'm gonna give it radius, sorry, radius, and by default I'm gonna give it something like 1 unit 1f. Okay, and the third argument, it will take the layer mask, basically which game object we want to target. Okay, so let's make a public layer mask, let's call this one target layer or attack layer, let's call it instead attack layer. Okay, close that up with semicolon, control S to save your code. Now let's move to Unity. So we should able to see those fields gonna pop up underneath our enemy script, so we need to assign those. Okay, so just wait for to compile, and when it's done, assign those. Okay, so now if we select this enemy game object, as you can see attack point, it says none, empty. So let's select this attack point and drag it right there, and attack radius we have chosen 1, so we're gonna leave it to 1, and we can adjust it over here. So that's why we don't need to go to the script and change that value. So that's why we created a variable of attack radius. And attack layer, we're gonna choose a player. Okay, and before you do that, make sure you just go to your player game object, assign that player as as a player layer. Okay, in order to do that, go over to inspector. In the top right you can see a layer, and it will be default, so click on that and click on add layer and name the layer what you want, and then go back to your player game object one more time and then assign that layer whatever you rename it recently. Okay, it's totally up to you. And as a attack layer we have chosen player, so that sphere only gonna check for player. Okay, so now let's go to script one more time and let's remove these two slashes now. Okay, so first thing, it will take the position, so let's pass our sorry, not checkpoint, attack point. Okay, attack point dot position. And the second thing, it will take the radius, so let's pass our attack radius. And the third thing, it will take the layer mask, basically which game object we want to target, and we're gonna pass attack layer. And as a attack layer we have chosen player, so this sphere only gonna check for that player. And now close that up with semicolon. So this function right over here, it can be true or false depending upon if that sphere is really colliding with this our player game object. Okay, with this player game object, then that function is gonna return us a true value, else it will return us a false value. So whatever the result is, so let's store into in a variable. Okay, that will be bool. Okay, it can be true or false. Okay, and let's call this something like call info or call collision info. Let's call it call info. Okay, call info, let's set equal to this. So this physics 2D physics.check sphere function right over here, it can be true or false depending upon if the sphere is really colliding with the player, then this one will be true. Okay, and we're storing into a bool parameter, so this call info can be true or false depending upon if the sphere is really colliding with the player game object or not. Okay, so we're gonna check in the next line if call info is true. Okay, call info is equals to true, or you can leave it like this. Okay, and make some curly brackets. So if call info is true, basically means that circle that sphere really colliding with that attack layer or that player game object. So this function right over here will be true, and if it's true, over here we checking if call info is true, basically that this sphere we colliding with our player game object, then in that situation player should take damage. So for now let's print out a message in the console. So for printing out, let's type debug.log, and in quotation let's say player should take damage. Okay, take damage, and then close that off with semicolon. Control S to save your code. Okay, and we never calling this function anywhere right over here, so whatever we write in this function, okay, will not be execute, and we're gonna call this function from that animation event. Okay, so let's go to script unity now. Okay, in order to call that, if we select this enemy and then choose this attack animation clip, as you can see, so before we do that, we cannot able to see the sphere. Okay, so it would be nice if we able to see the sphere, and we do know to draw a sphere or to draw something we need to use another inbuilt function of unity. Okay, so that is on draw gizmo selected function. So let's open up our script or go to script one more time, and we have to type this function. Make sure you type then as I did right over here, it's called on draw gizmo selected. You can ignore this line. Okay, you don't need if you can ignore this. Okay, and now in this function what we have to do, we need to draw the that sphere. Okay, that attack sphere. So in order to draw, we have to use this gizmos dot draw where sphere. Okay, and this function right over here, it will draw the sphere. So firstly it will take the position from where we want to draw, so let's pass our attack point where we want to draw. Okay, attack point dot position, and the second thing, it will take the radius. Okay, so let's pass our attack radius and close that up with semicolon. Okay, So this function will draw the sphere at this point with this much of radius, but the problem is this gonna give us an error. Why? If you haven't dragged this attack point right over here to this attack point field, so this one will be null, okay, basically empty. And over here what we doing, this function is still gonna find that attack position, and it will draw with this much of radius. But we do know if we haven't dragged it there, basically we haven't assigned this attack point, so this function will still try to find that point, okay, but we do know it will not able to do that. So that's why this one gonna give us an error. So before we draw the circle from that attack point, we need to check if we drag it that attack point to attack point field or not, okay. So before we draw the circle, we're gonna check if, okay, if attack point is equals to null, okay. So in that situation, attack point basically empty, so what we need to stop drawing that sphere, okay. So basically we have to type return, okay, and close that up with semicolon. So basically after return, whatever line of code gonna write, it will not be execute. So if the attack point is null, basically empty, we just stopping, okay. After return, whatever line of code you write, it will not be executed. So basically this one will stop drawing the sphere, okay. And we can choose the color of the sphere we want to draw. So we can do this by gizmos dot color, and we can set any color we want. So equal to, we will set color dot white, black, clear, red, anything like that. I'm gonna select yellow, okay. Close that up with semicolon, control S to save your code, and let's move to Unity now. So the circle will be drawn from that attack point with this much of radius, and we can adjust the value right over here. So we don't need to go to the script again and again. So that's the thing. So basically what we have to do, so this is our attack point, okay. And if we select this enemy, I don't know, so the radius of that, if we select this enemy, move over to animation tab and select this attack animation clip and something move over here. So we need to adjust the radius of that attack point, okay. So let's make it smaller, something like to fit our arms, okay. I guess now it's pretty fine, okay. Adjust the attack radius, okay. So once you are done, and now we need to call the function, and what that function is doing, it just for printing out message this, if that sphere, if this sphere really colliding with this player game object, then player should take damage. But before we do that, we just printing out message says something like player should take damage. So this message just gonna pop up in the console when this sphere collide with that player game object, okay. So basically we need to call this attack function, and attack function will do this thing. Firstly, it will check if the sphere is really colliding with that player or not. If it's, then we just printing out message, okay. So let's go to now, so in order to call that, so this is zombie attack animation clip, as you can see. So basically we need add an event for that. To do so, let's go to project tab, and then animation, where we have the attack animation of zombie, select that. So I have over here, as you can see, zombie attack, okay. Select that, go over to inspector, and then what we need, go select this animation and scroll down to the bottom, you can see event. So click on that, and then click right over here, okay. Click right over here, and we have to name the event, or the basically the function name. So make sure you name the function name as I did over here, as you did over here, which is attack, okay. Make sure you just spell it correct, okay. Attack. So basically we want to call that function, so we have to pass the function name, which is attack, okay. And we have to drag the object, basically in which game object we implemented this attack function. As you can see, this is sitting on in our enemy script or enemy class, as you can see. So basically we have to choose object, it says none object, so click right over here, and we have to choose the script or the class name in which script or class this function is available, okay. So let's find their enemy, So let's select that, and now okay, we selected. And after doing that, I'm gonna go over to something like 50. Okay, something like right over here, if we select this enemy, okay, so and make sure you just click on this apply button, okay, and it will do the thing. Now if we select this enemy game object and move over to animation tab, select this zombie attack, as you can see indeed that animation event just added up right over here, as you can see this one, okay, and this one doing attack as you can see. And we're gonna move so if we select this enemy, okay, select this enemy and select this attack animation clip. So something like right over here, this is the perfect time of calling that this attack function, okay, basically this animation. So we're gonna move it just a little bit right over here. So let's go to project tab, then let's select that animation zombie attack one more time, go over to inspector, then animation, scroll down to the bottom, and we're gonna move it something over here. So this will be the perfect time, and after doing that, click on this apply, okay. So now let's select this console and let's hit this play button in the top. So once the player collide with this sphere and enemy just and we calling that function once the enemy attacking, okay, we should able to see. So I'm gonna clear the console. So let's so if we get close to class, as you can see indeed the message just getting pop up in the console says player should take damage, okay. So instead of printing out message, what we need to be basically need to take damage, okay, we need to take damage. So before we take damage, we need to give some help to our player game object, okay. So let's select this player game object, let's open up the player script, okay, player movement, I'm gonna open up anything you can. So okay, so let's go to top of our class and let's give some help to our enemy game object, okay. So let's give it public in, let's call it something like max health, okay, max health, and by default I'm gonna give it 3 unit. And let's go to bottom and we're gonna make a take damage function, okay, and we will make it public because we want to call this function from another class or script. And for function we have to type void, and let's call this take damage, okay. Take damage, take damage, make first bracket and some curly brackets, okay. So what we want to do inside this function, we just want to subtract this max health, okay. So we're gonna go to max health and we will minus equal 1, okay, 1. Basically once we call this function, let's suppose we call this function for the first time, okay. So what we doing inside this function, max health we do know by default we have given 3. So 3 minus 1 will be 2, eventually it will shrink down, okay. So basically once we call this take damage function, it will just subtract from our max health by 1 unit every single time, okay. So that's the thing. And but we do know once the max health reaches 0, and if we try to call this function, so 0 let's suppose max health we have 0, so 0 minus 1, if we call this function, so 0 minus 1 will be minus 1, so it will go to a negative value. So before we subtract, we need to check, okay. So we will check if max health if max health is already lesser than or equal to 0, okay. So what we want in that situation, make some curly bracket, we don't want to subtract anymore. So we're gonna type return, and we do know after return whatever line of code you write, it will not be executed. So this subtraction will be stopped right after this max health became 0. So also we're gonna make a die function, okay, and that die function's gonna destroy our player game object or something like that. So we're gonna make it void die. We don't need to make it private or public, it automatically get assigned private, okay, and make first bracket and some curly brackets, okay. And what we want to do inside this function, now for now let's print out a message, okay. For printing out, let's type debug.log and let's say something like player dies, okay, in quotation, sorry for background noises, okay, coming out, player dies, and close that off with semicolon. Control S to save your code, and we need to call this function die function. But when we shoot, once the max health reaches 0, when our player game object don't have any health. So let's go to update function, and we do know update function runs every single frame. So we're gonna check right there. We're gonna check if max health, okay, if max health of player, if it's lesser than or equal to 0, so player don't have any health. So make some curly brackets. So we're gonna call this die function, and what die function is doing, it's just printing out the message says player dies right away. So let's call it right over here, die function, and close that up with semicolon. Control S to save your code. And we also need to call this take damage function. But when we shoot, once the enemy attack on our player game object, then we're gonna call this function. And what this function is doing, it's just subtracting from our max health by 1 unit. Okay, so let's go to enemy script. Why are we attacking? So over here we just printing out message. Okay, instead of printing out message that basically that player game object should take damage, basically we need to call that function take damage, and we do know what take damage function is doing. Okay, so let's so if call info, basically that sphere collide with that player game object. Now it's time to player game object should take damage. Okay, so let's firstly what are we gonna do, we're gonna use this find object of type. Okay, and find object of type, just type this. Okay, and into arrows, it will take the script in which script that function is setting on. So we do know in player script. Okay, player script, player movement script we created, and make this first brackets and dot. What we want to call that take damage function. So let's call it and make first bracket, close that up with semicolon. So if call info is true, basically that's we are colliding with our player game object. So what we doing, firstly we just finding the script which is player movement, and we do know in player movement we created that take damage function. So basically we calling it, and we do know what take damage function is doing, it's just subtracting from our max health by 1 unit every single time. Okay, so control S to save your code. Now let's move to Unity, and let's select this console in the bottom and hit display. You can give any value you like, it's totally up to you as a max health. Okay, but I by default I have given 3, it's totally up to you how much you want. So let's hit this play button in the top and select the console in the bottom, and let's check that out. Okay, if it's working fine or not. Okay, so enemy will come to us, and now, so as you can see max health became 2, then 1, and now max health gonna be 0. Okay, and it just stop at 0, it's not subtracting anymore. So basically we need to destroy player game object right now, and as you can see player dies message just getting pop up multiple times. So what we have done, we do know once the max health it reaches 0, we're just calling the die function, and what die function is doing is just printing out the message in the console says player dies. Okay, so I'm gonna unplay this. So I hope you get the idea of it, how you can just take damage or make the animation. Okay, basically how you can call attack function in perfect time through animation event. I hope you get the idea of it, and lastly thanks for watching this video. Okay, goodbye.